Okay, I think we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PrestaShop Project live update. This is the last live update of 2023, so time flies. My name is Christian Podemski. I work as a tech evangelist for the PrestaShop Project at PrestaShop Company, and I'm joined by Matthew and Jonathan, who will be today presenting to you some very interesting talks that were already shown by them during PrestaShop Developer Conference in Paris. So let's take a look at the full agenda of today's event. First, I will introduce you to some of the project news. Then we'll have two presentations, starting with the one from Mathieu about PrestaShop news, where we are and where we are going. And second presentation will come from Jonathan, who will be speaking about API in PrestaShop 9. Last but not least, we will have Q&A session. So if you have any questions regarding the project, either regarding the project in general or regarding the presentations that you can see on today's live update, feel free to ask them using the chat. But remember that there will also be recording later on YouTube, where you can also ask questions in the comments. So let's start with the project news. And today's news, the first one is quite obvious because some of you may have noticed that today's live update looks a bit different. And this is because PrestaShop SA has decided that it's finally time to make the open source project consistent with the new PrestaShop branding that was unveiled a few months ago in May. So starting today, all materials related to the project will change, and work on the rebranding is currently underway. We will share more details regarding the rebranding in the article which we aim to publish later today. And what's most important is that in this article, you will have a chance to ask us questions if you have any about the rebranding, about the project. So follow our build blog. We will share the link to the article as soon as possible during the live update as well. So if you have any questions, head to the article which we later publish on the build blog. So that's the main news of today. So let's move to the next one. And the next one is very excited. It's about new project that has been introduced to you today using build blog and other channels that we already have. And it is now time for the project to be unveiled on the live update. It's a project created by Elodie, by a product designer who is working at PrestaShop in the open source team, in the product designers team. She's working at PrestaShop. She has been working at PrestaShop for 2 years already, and she's the one responsible for waiting for UX issues at GitHub. So the project is about Hummingbird, about the hooks in Hummingbird, and basically it's a visual representation of hooks that you have available in Hummingbird. As you can see now on the screen, there's a layout of the homepage view in Hummingbird, and you can see all the hooks that are available in Hummingbird, and you can see where they are. And this is clue of the project. We want to give you a better understanding of how many hooks there are in front office of Hummingbird and what the hooks are, plus where they are, which is most important point to this project. Sometimes you, especially if you are a beginner at PrestaShop, you don't really know where to look hooks, where they are located, how many they are available in the project in front office. So this project is for Hummingbird, so for the theme that is set to be published in PrestaShop v9, probably next to the Classic, but it's already a great starting point for you to better understand how front office in PrestaShop is rich with all the hooks available. If you want to know more about the project, if you want to see all the files that has been created by Elodie, feel free to head to the developer documentation, search for Hummingbird, and there is a new section in the documentation, Hummingbird theme, along with hook mapping project for Hummingbird theme. And on the documentation, there's we added all the pages, all the main pages from Hummingbird, and when you visit single page, you have basically a view, an overview of this page and all the hooks, I think all the hooks that are available on this page. And I said that I think there are all the hooks available, but that might not be the case. And since this is an open source project, feel free to contribute if you see any hooks that are missing, any mistakes that you can see in the project, in the visual representation of the pages. If you see something, if you want to contribute, there are more details in the article that has been published to the Build PrestaShop blog already. So that's the news. Thank you to Elodie and to everyone who was involved to the project. I think it's a great starting point, especially to newcomers who wants to start working on front office in PrestaShop. And the next news is this kind of news where I just want to say a thank you to all attendees who attended the PrestaShop Developer Conference that we held in November in Paris. It was really a great event. We had over 150 attendees. We had really great talks. We had really a great agenda. And it all sounds fun. We had a great agenda and all. But if you weren't there, you don't know that. So in order to share with you all the knowledge that speakers already shared with the attendees of this conference, we decided to work with the speakers, with all the speakers that were presenting during the conference, to share their presentations with you in one way or another. Today we'll start with two presentations from Mathieu and Jonathan, and later we'll invite to the live update or to publish a guest article on the Build blog the rest of the speakers. So be sure that we will try and we will do whatever we can to share with you all the content that has been shared with attendees during the PrestaShop Developer Conference. And if you want to follow the news, the content, make sure to read Build PrestaShop, the Build blog for the PrestaShop project. Make sure to join our Slack channel where we will definitely share the news about the incoming content. Plus, it's time for the presentations now, so we can hear from Mathieu and Jonathan about their presentations. So I will invite now Mathieu on stage. Hello, Mathieu.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Very good. It's close to Xmas. I hope everybody's ready.
Yeah, we are definitely ready. I hope to see some great news regarding the project. So I'm leaving you on the stage. Feel free to present.
Okay, yeah, and thank you for the slides. Great. I'm gonna make it like this. And yeah, as Christian just mentioned, this is something that I already presented at the PrestaShop Developer Conference. I am really happy to present it again here. But if I had a chance to meet you back in November, then I'm afraid I'm not going to learn anything new today. But whatever, I hope some people here didn't see this before, so I can give you some cool news. PrestaShop news, where we are and where we are going. So during the PrestaShop Developer Conference, I made a presentation about 3 topics. I talked again about PrestaShop 8.1, then I talked about the project evolution over time, because it's always nice at the end of the year to take a step back and look at what you've been doing for 1 year, and also some takeaways about the next year and PrestaShop 9.0. Today, I will not redo the first part because we did it many times on this channel. I think we have spoken about PrestaShop 8.1 multiple times. So in theory, nothing new for you guys here. That's why I'm moving directly to part 2. So part 2 is some numbers about the projects. It's interesting to check this because it gives you some idea of how we're doing in terms of community, activity, and code base. So the first thing I wanted to present is I checked the number of pull requests merged for any version from 1.7.4, so it's been a long time before, until 8.1.0. And you might be wondering, okay, so this graph is first going up. So again, this is the number of pull requests merged inside one PrestaShop version. And what's happening for 1.7.7 and 1.7.8 is we have a peak and then it's going down. Does it look suspicious? Is there something wrong with this? Actually, this is quite normal. This is because PrestaShop 1.7.7 and 1.7.8, these 2 versions were quite very long to build. We worked almost 1 year and a half on these two versions. So when you have a branch that is open for a very long time, obviously you're going to get a lot more pull requests. In comparison, PrestaShop 8.0 and 8.1 were a lot shorter to build. So we had branch duration a lot shorter, which means there was a lot less pull requests. However, if you do look at the ratio between how long the branch was open and how many PRs you got, PRs meaning pull requests, actually PrestaShop 8.1 and 8.0 are doing quite well. And I have something better to show this. I have another chart, and this chart, I actually prefer this one because it shows not only the PRs, the pull requests merged inside the core, but on all the projects. Because in the previous chart, you could not see the work being done on the developer documentation, on all the native modules, on all the websites, on the example modules, on all our dependencies. This chart for me is better because it shows you the full activity of the project. And you can see that from 2018, we've grown. There was a big peak in 2020. I have no explanation for this. Let's just say it was a very wonderful year. And since 2020, we've been quite steady. And we have a little increase in 2023. So I'm really happy about this one. And on this chart, I actually did something. So you know that I work for PrestaShop SA, and in PrestaShop SA, we have a group, we have a dedicated developer team working full-time on the project. So we work from Monday to Friday. And obviously, since we have a lot of time to dedicate to the project, we submit a lot of pull requests. So what I did on this chart is that I put two numbers. There is the full number of pull requests done per year. And next, there is the pull requests that have been done by people outside of this team. Sometimes we say the second column, the one without PrestaShop SA, is a community, but I don't like this column because I believe we all belong in the community. So what I want to highlight is that the column, the light green column, is growing every year. And this part is the number of people, number of pull requests submitted by people who are not paid to do this. So we could say it's pull requests driven not by money, but by efficiency, need for something in the project. So basically, it's people who decided to contribute to the project, not because they were paid to directly. And this year, I am really happy because on this number, we have an all-time record. So in 2022, we had 862 PRs of this sort. And this year, we have broken the 1,000 barrier. I saw today Christian writing a blog post on LinkedIn about that. So this is something we are really proud of. Another chart interesting to show the activity of the project is the number of committers over years. Because you know that in January 2022, I believe, or maybe a little bit in the past, we opened the maintainer position that allow people to review pull requests to people outside the company. And we welcomed at this time Pululuk and Christian, and since then we have welcomed more people. I say committers here, but it's both committers and maintainers. I put them together in the chart, and we can see that over 2 years, we have welcomed approximately 20 people to the project. Again, I have made the distinction between people working for the company and people who are not. And you can see that, well, both numbers have grown. So this is really cool news. That being said, not everybody today is active in the project. So you can't say we have more than 30 people active in the project team today. But I'm still really happy that we have welcomed approximately 20 new persons inside the project in the duration of 2 years. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about numbers. Then I guess you might be interested in some takeaways about PrestaShop 9.0. Disclaimer, I'm not going to give you the full roadmap of PrestaShop 9.0. Even I don't know it, because remember, this is an open source project. So in PrestaShop 9.0, you will have the content that we put in it. And when I say we, it's both me, my team, and everybody else. So if you want to really see something inside PrestaShop 9.0, Don't wait for someone else to do it. Contribute and put it there. However, I can give you some important things to keep in mind about PrestaShop 9.0.0. But it's not only this. There will be obviously more. I just checked this morning because I thought it was interesting. A reminder, this version started the day we froze PrestaShop 8.1. So it was the 1st of February. So it's been almost 1 year it's being built. And we have already 833 pull request merge, which I believe is already more than PrestaShop 8.1. So it looks like when we have new major versions, people are really fired up. And I just said it, yeah, it's going to be another major version. And a major version means breaking changes. So what can we expect in terms of breaking changes? The very first thing we did about PrestaShop 9.0.0 was to bump Symfony version, because PrestaShop 8 is relying on Symfony 4, and Symfony 4 is end of life. First, we bumped PrestaShop Symfony version to 5, and if you have checked GitHub lately, you might have noticed that we are starting the work to go to Symfony 6. So PrestaShop 9 will be powered by Symfony 6, Symfony 6.4, which was released very recently and will be an LTS branch maintained until 2027. So we're good for some time. Also, we already published a blog post about it, but we have decided to drop the support of PHP 8, less than 8.1. So right now, PrestaShop 9 is compatible with PHP 8.1 and 8.2. And I hope that we will do it for 8.3. I say I hope because I think it's a good thing and could do it. However, remember, PHP is an ecosystem. So before we can make it ourselves compatible with 8.3, we need the dependency of PrestaShop to also be compatible. So it's like a cascade. First, you have the version of PHP being released. Then you have multiple projects that start being released. And then we have PrestaShop. So I think it will be doable, but I don't want to commit on this. So let's say maybe. Okay, another thing we will have in PrestaShop 9 will be Hummingbird, because Hummingbird have been in the work, I think, for more than a year now. It has been used by people, it has been battle trained, it has been monitored, it has been improved. I think it's mature enough, no? So Hummingbird will be bundled inside PrestaShop 9.0.0 next to Classic Theme. We have kept Classic Theme inside because we want to allow people to engage in a smooth transition between the Classic Theme and Hummingbird theme. And in order to do a smooth transition, you need to be able to use both and to start getting compatible with Hummingbird while Classic is still there. We plan to remove Classic Theme in PrestaShop 10. So basically, PrestaShop 9 will be a transition version for moving from Classic to Hummingbird. And another takeaway, we will have a new back office API. And this slide is quite empty. There's a reason why. It's because Jonathan, just after me, is going to come and tell you a lot more about this API. So I didn't want to spoil his presentation. That's why I let you tell you more about it. Looks like I only gave one thing away. It's being built on API platform. That's all for me.
Thank you, Mathieu. That was quick, but really a great news for the project. So it's been the best year in the project. It was a historical year. So thank you for presenting the news, and thank you for presenting the glimpse of what we can expect from PrestaShop 9. I see one question from Frank. When you mentioned committers, did you mention committers from all councils, like all committers from the project, or only from the technical council?
I see you, Frank. It's because Frank just recently introduced in the project the idea of committers in the QA council. So when I did the presentation, there was only one kind of committers. So it was committers in the tech council, yeah. I guess that now I need to update my presentation, and we also need to, everywhere we talk about committers, we need to make sure to indicate whether it's committers in the QA council or tech council, yeah.
Thank you, Frank, for your question, and we are looking forward to see pull requests from you to help us clean a bit the structure of organization of the project. Okay, thank you, Matthew. I will now move to the next presentation. Of course, if you have any more questions about PrestaShop 9 or the project or the news that you just saw, feel free to ask them on the chat. I will now invite Jonathan to the stage.
Hi.
So now's the time for something exciting. The last time you were here, you presented something really as well as excited as the new project, which was the new product page, which was the new product
All
page for
right.
PrestaShop 8.1. So we are looking forward to see something even more exciting through this new initiative.
And that's not up to me to decide, but let's wait for the demo and people will have their own opinion, I guess.
Okay, enjoy.
Yes, thank you. So, hi everyone. So I'm Jonathan, lead developer of the open source team at PrestaShop. Today I'm going to present to you one of the new features that we introduced in PrestaShop 9, which is a new API based on OAuth protocol and CQRS commands. So just to give you a bit of context, that's what we mean by the API for PrestaShop and what we have today. Today, we already have a legacy web service that can be used as an API. It's been present since PrestaShop 1.5, maybe even older, but at least that version. It's a generic implementation. It's based on the object model, which is our legacy persistence model. It allows us to do some basic CRUD operations, meaning that you can read, create, update, and delete any content in PrestaShop as long as there is its related object model. But it's quite simple today, and you could compare it to editing the tables inside PHP MyAdmin or inside any SQL manager. Basically, you can change any content, but it doesn't have much intelligence. It's also a bit old compared to new web standards, especially regarding how you can authenticate with this web service. And it's based on legacy code, not tested. That's why it's really hard to maintain for us, and we are most of the time scared to modify it because we are never sure if a small modification could break it or not. And as I said, it's mostly based on object model, which is supposed to disappear at some point. So that's why it was meaningful and relevant to us to start a new API that is not based on legacy code. So the goals of this modern API was to bring a more secure API with a better authentication system than the web service one. We needed to have a better tracking of the action because today the action you can do with the web service are quite simple and you don't know if it was done with a specific API key or not. Give more intelligence to the API compared to the basic CRUD. Basically, be able to have some API that will have some business rules that are more advanced than just basic edition, and be more in tune with the modern standards. And of course, we still think about the modules and the need to add some custom APIs into PrestaShop as well. So the solution we decided to use is based on API platform, which is a famous Symfony framework, used to be Rapid API. We decided to use it because it's quite famous, so it's already known by many developers, and you can easily find some documentation and some help in using this framework. It provides some provider and processor interface, which is how you can integrate inside the framework itself and customize the way it works. So that's why it allowed us to add some custom provider and processor to link the new APIs with our CQRS queries and comments, because the goal is to capitalize on all the work that was already done regarding the CQRS objects. But you can also use doctrine entities rapid development. So basically, if you only have 1.3 entities with the correct mapping and attributes on them, you could build your own API very quickly, which we thought could be some interesting features for the external module and for external developers. We won't use it for the core APIs, but still it's a tool that can be useful for developers. And it also integrates a few different tools, among which SwaggerDoc, which is not something that is necessarily required, but since it's already present, it's always good to have some side feature that we don't need to invest time on and are available out of the box. And so this API will be based on our CQRS, as I said. The purpose behind this is that we wanted to have a domain approach with more business logic and not just simple CRUD operations. As I said, we can also capitalize on all the already implemented CQRS code. So basically, the idea was that once we develop the core elements of this new API, which are based on some configuration, you can define an endpoint which is using a CQRS API. And once all this logic will be developed and work for most of our CQRS commands, we don't need to invest additional time on developing the API itself because it will mainly be based on simple configurations. Also, since the CQRS we are using are the same as the one that are used inside the BO in the migrated page, it also guarantees that you have the same behavior with the API as you have with the form. And since all those existing CQRS commands have most of them, at least except the very old one, they are very well tested with our behead test. It also brings some more stability, meaning that the API should be much less buggy than the web service could have been. And even if some bugs are found, it's really easy for us to fix them and to improve the behead library that we have so that it gets us more and more stable over time. So now we'll go and explain a little bit about the OAuth authentication and authorization, because not everyone is necessarily used to this protocol and different terms. I won't get into a full course or masterclass about what is OAuth, but at least I can give you a bit of hints for those who are not used to it so that we share some common terminology. So in OAuth 2 terminology, you get different entities that each have their roles and purpose. So I'm going to detail a few of them here so that we share the same vocabulary. So you have the resource owner, which is as you can see, the entity that has the ownership of a resource. In our case, it's usually the end user, so the merchant or the admin sys of the PrestaShop website. The client here, it's not a customer, it's the application which is accessing to this resource. So usually it could be a web application or a smartphone app or a server which is trying to get some information from your shop because it is trying to sync with it. You have the notion of access token, which is a token that you use in each of your requests and contains the authorization that you are using and the fact that you can access this resource or not. The resource server is the server that is hosting your resources. So it's to be opposed to the authorization server, which are two different entities. This notion is really important. The authorization is the server that has all the permissions and knows what each user or client has permissions to do. And when you ask the authorization server, okay, I need to access this resource, give me a token so that I can do it. It will check, okay, give me your credentials, and then I will check them in my database if they are valid. Then I can give you an access token with some specific scopes, which are similar to permission. And with this access token that contains the scopes and your credentials, you can then call the resource server. and it will allow you to access the resource that you meant to read or modify. And this access token is encoded in a format that is called a JWT token or JSON Web Token, which is a convenient way to encode and store a bit of information that can be reused on usage by the resource server. In our use case, based on this generic terminology, the resource owner, so the person that has the authorization to give access, is the merchant or the administrator. The client, in the use case that we focused on for this new feature, because there are many ways and many use cases in the OAuth 2 protocol, but for now we are mainly focusing on a use case where you have two servers that try to communicate with each other. So basically, you have an OMS to handle your orders or a PIM to handle your product. You want them to communicate efficiently and safely with your PrestaShop website, and they will be communicating with the APIs via this OAuth 2 protocol. So the client in this case is the external server, which is trying to access your data on your PrestaShop website. And in this case, your PrestaShop website will act both as the resource server and the authorization server. Even if they usually are different entities and different servers, in PrestaShop v9, your website will be able to act both as an authorization server and a resource server. That doesn't mean that it will always be the case. You will be able in the future to use a different authorization server if you want, but out of the box, PrestaShop will still allow you to use some internal implementation of an authorization server. So since our main use case is about two machines talking with each other, which is called server-to-server interaction, the recommended OAuth workflow is the client credential workflow, which is based on a client ID and a client secret that you can provide to the external server so that it will then be allowed to get its access token and access the resource on your website. So this is really one of the use cases that you can have with OAuth workflow, and it's only dedicated to machine talking with a machine. This notion is important because it means that when you are using the API and performing some action on your web shop, you are not connected as a user. You are connected as a server. So it's also important for the tracking because the action you will be doing won't be registered as being performed by an employee, but by, for example, my PIM solution, which is installed on an external server. So you still know from where the operation was done, but you don't know who did it. You just know what did it. It's kind of a nuance, but that is important in this case. And since the server that you are giving access to is considered trusty, the workflow in this case is simple. It doesn't require some long back and forth communication, which can be the case in other workflow when you are registering as a user. Some of those workflows you're probably accustomed to when you use, for example, Google or Facebook or any other website as a way to authenticate on a website. So this is based on OAuth protocol as well, but that's not the one we are implementing here. This one is more simple, but I will go into a bit more detail about the client credentials workflow. So basically, the principle and how the different requests will be made is that you are an OMS, so this is a server. You want to access a resource, so the first thing you are going to do is call the authorization server to request an access token. And to do so, you will need to give it your client ID and secret, of course, in a secured HTTPS request. You need to specify that you are registering using the client credentials grant type and the list of required scopes that you are going to use with this token. This also is important, even if you have access to 20 scopes, for example. Every time you get a new token, you need to specify, I want this token, and I plan to use this set of scope, maybe 1, 2, or 3. Not all 20 I have access to, but only a subset of it. The purpose behind this is that in case your token gets stolen by any means, the person who would have stolen this token would not get all the access to the permission that you have, but only the ones in these tokens. So that's why that's what gives you more security in this kind of workflow, because compared to someone who would have your credential and would connect as you and would get all the permission, in case someone steals the token, it will only get access to a few subsets of those permissions. So that's why it's recommended not to always ask all the scopes you are allowed to use, but all the scopes you are going to need with the operation you're about to do. So the authorization server will check that your client's ID and secret are correct, of course, that the scopes you required are correctly assigned to your client and that he's allowed to use them. And if everything is okay, it will return an access token in the response. And this access token, then you get to use in the following request. So this time you are going to call the resource server, which is the actual API. So you want to access to a product, an order, or anything. And each of your requests to this server in one of the header, you can specify the token that you just get, which is encoded. It's a very, very long string that you can't read as a human, but the resource server is able to. And with this token, the resource server is able to validate that it is valid. It will check the audience. So does the client ID still exist? Is it enabled? And it will also check that the scopes that are inside the token match the resource that you are trying to access. So if you are trying to have access to a product, for example, do you have the product scope, for example? And then again, if everything is correct, the resource server will return you the response with the resource you are trying to access. So in this case, we have the two entities that are symbolized, the authorization server and the resource server. But as I said, in our use case, in this V9 version, your PrestaShop website is able to handle both those responsibilities, and it communicates one with each other. And so now that you are a bit more accustomed to the OAuth workflow and the client credential, maybe one of the questions you have is, how do I define the endpoints for my API? So since we use API platform as a framework, we chose one of the representation that is allowed by API platform, which is based on some new feature which are available on PHP 8, which are the attributes. So for those who know them, it looks like some annotations. It's just that now there are some native feature available on PHP 9. The advantage of this kind of configuration is that you can define your access points and the authorization and the way they are going to be represented in a single class. So you get everything inside a single file, which is quite handy for developers. So basically here you can see that we have a DTO, or data transfer object, sorry, that represent an entity which would be API access. So you can give it all the fields that are inside your entity. So it has an API access ID, which is an integer, a secret, which is a string, and so on. And this will give the API platform the structure of your data. And that's why we allow it to encode it, serialize it, and understand it. And then on the upper side, we see that we define a gate operation. So it's an operation to read a resource with an URL. And the important thing, or the interesting thing, is how we configure it. And here you can see that We are using a query provider. So this is the component that we developed specifically so that API platform is able to use our CQRS queries. And we also define which query it should be using to get the information, which will then allow to fill this API access object, which will then return you the content inside the API. So I talked a lot, but I forgot to click. But basically, that's what I just explained to you. The only thing that I forgot, I hope that you can all read correctly, but we also define the scopes, which are the permissions that allow you to access to this endpoint in this same file. So this is quite handy because everything is in a single file. And when you will edit the access to all this API later in the back office, which I will show you in the demo, everything is automatically scanned inside this PHP class so that you can assign or not the different scopes that are allowed in all the APIs that you have defined. And something I forgot. Oh, I think it's okay. So how would you define, for example, a read operation? So the get and the delete, as you can see, this is the way you usually do this in API platforms. So you use a get object, which represents a get operation, as in a REST API. With the URL, here we provided a query provider and a query which will allow us to do this operation, get me the information. And for the delete action, it's similar. It's just that we used a different command, which in this case is delete API access command. So as you can see, just by defining those configuration, we already have two API which would be available. We can get the API access entity, or we can delete it. And we didn't need to code anything. We just need to configure those endpoints based on the CQRS commands that are already available inside the PrestaShop core code. The important thing here is the one that are in those blue squares. So the provider is the one that we created. The query are the one that you configure and that are referenced to the core CQRS commands. And you can also see that we define the scopes. So for read operation, we use an API access read, for example. And for the delete operation, you would need to have the API access write scope. So they are quite similar. And if we look at another example, which are based for post, which is used for creation, this is also the same principle, except for here we will use a command processor, which is similar to the query provider I presented earlier, but is more used for write operation. So that's why here you use command processor and you get to use the command to create an API access or the one to edit it. And in this second example, you can also see that we configure a command which is used for the write operation. And we also specify a query. This is used for the result or the output of this API so that after you perform the operation of writing and updating your entity, you want to get a full representation of the new content of your entity. And that's when we say, okay, now use the query to get the new content so that the API can return you the full object and the full data that you just updated. The principle is the same, and we use this extra properties, which is a dynamic array in API platform that allows you to set a bunch of different configuration, which are not by default understood by the framework, but with the custom processor, we can understand these extra properties. So it's the same principle as we saw with the get and delete. But the thing is that that was our initial idea of how we could configure those endpoints, but it's not really easy to use, especially because it is based on this array. which doesn't force any type or is not even understood as a default configuration by the API platform workflow. So we decided to provide some easier to use operations. So when you see the post and the put, these are operations that are available out of the box by API platform. And we created our own operation, but custom tailored for the CQRS implementation that we made. So as you can see, it is much shorter because we don't need to specify the command processor or the provider because it already knows that this is the purpose of this endpoint is to use a CQRS query or command. And all the extra properties which were initially based in an array are now usable as real options of this operation, which gives you a better indentation in your code when you are using your IDE. And it also allows us to pre-configure a few sets that were kind of complex to understand at first, but basically, the idea is to keep the configuration of those endpoints as minimum as possible and to do most of the work behind the scene without even you realizing it. So we created those 4 operations for creation, update, to get an entity, of course, and to delete it, which are the basic CRUD operation that we saw earlier, except that they are not basic CRUD as we saw for the web service. They are now based on actual CQRS commands, which have much more domain logic inside of them. So this is how we define API resources and the endpoints of the core API. But the question is, how do you do this in your module yourself? The answer is quite simple, actually. We use the basic convention. The thing is that even for the core API that we will be using and developing, we will actually be using also a module ourselves. So the endpoints configuration won't be inside the PrestaShop project itself in the core. It will be in a native module, so outside of it, meaning that from the start, we already had to think as a native first and not as a native baby. The advantage of this is that since we were forced to handle this from the start, any other module will be able to do the same thing that we do for the core APIs. And another advantage of this is that since these API resources are in a module that is external from the core, it also allows us to release it more frequently and on a schedule that is completely different from PrestaShop release cycle from the version. Meaning that if PrestaShop 9 is released and at the time we only have, I don't know, 10 or 20 endpoints available because we didn't have time to develop more, we will be able to add 5 2 weeks later and 10 a month later and so on. And the number of endpoints that will be available will keep growing even without us releasing a new version of PrestaShop itself. Only the module will need to be released, so it will be much more convenient to increase and improve the endpoints that we have access to. So the convention, as I said, is quite simple in your module. You just need to create a folder SRC API platform resources. And inside this folder, you can add your DTO objects that are understood by the API platform framework. Then you just need to configure all the attributes that we saw earlier. And basically, that's it. Once your module is installed or updated, the API platform framework is able to automatically scan this code, this folder, and any class and any endpoints that is defined inside it will be then integrated into the available endpoints that are on your website. And in case you are not used to using DTO object or attributes, API platform also allows you to configure it with YAML or XML configuration files. So we also included the possibility to configure your custom endpoints with YAML and XML. It's just that you will need to put it in a different folder, but that's basically the same principle. So I will just finish this long presentation with a hopefully short demo, just to show you how all this work inside the back office. So this new API is experimental for now. So the first thing you will need to do if you want to enable it is to go inside into advanced parameters and the experimental feature. It is hidden behind the feature flag, which is here. So if you enable authorization server, you will then get access to this new menu in this new link, sorry, in the menu, which is authorization server, in which you can list and edit all the accesses that you have. So this is where you create the client configuration that then allows you to connect to. That's surprising. I didn't have this client, but doesn't matter. So we need to change all my demo, but that's the demo effect, I guess. So here I'm gonna create a new access. So let's say I have a new client. This name is purely for your usage, but it's mostly to identify the content of your client. You can also add a short description if you want. Here you can specify how long each access token duration will be. We enable it, and here you can see we have a list of scopes. These are all the scopes that are available on the different API endpoints that we can use currently. So I'm not gonna think it much. I'm just gonna give me all the permissions. And when I create this new client secret, this new API access, sorry, and save it, then I get a client secret. So this is important to know that this secret is only shown once. You won't get to see it ever again because even this clear value is not saved as is. Of course, it's encoded inside the database. So you are warned that you need to copy this in a safe place, of course, so that you can reuse it later to connect to the API. So once I get this client secret, you can connect and get your access token using this URL, so API/OAuth2/token. You will need to specify a few fields and inside your query. So as we saw in the schema earlier, you need to specify that you are authenticated with client credential grant type. We use the client ID that I already configured, which is test. Here I can copy my secret, and here I can specify a list of scope that I plan on using with this token that I'm gonna get. And then if I hit send, in theory it's supposed to work, but I expect the demo effect not to be nice with me. Oh, good thing, because I didn't understood why I didn't have the same API accesses as I was supposed to. But anyway, you get this, as I said, this long bearer token, which is encoded. And if you copy all this very long string, you can then access to jwt.io, which is a website that allows you to easily decode your token. And inside this JWT token, you can see a few information that are stored. So here we can find our client ID. You get the expiration date of your token because it cannot be used as long as you want, of course. As we defined earlier, it will expire in an hour. And you get all the scopes that were associated with this specific token. It's not all the scopes that I have access to, as we could see. I have two more which are not here, but they are the ones that I specified inside the query when I requested for this token. If I uncheck, for example, those two, and I only want an access token for the API access read and write, and request a new access token, the one that will be generated won't get all these scopes. If we decode this new one, as you can see here, this time, and I only have access to the API access read and write. And once I get this access token, it allows me to get access to all the APIs. So I will just show you, for example, we have some endpoints to create a customer group, for example. So for those who don't know this client, this API client, which is quite useful in Somnium, it allows you to define in your OAuth2 tab the way you get your access token. So it's inside this configuration. So here I can just specify what is the access token URL, my client ID. Here I need to update the client secret because it's just changed. Which scope do I need for this specific URL, which is the creation endpoint. And here I can refresh the token to make sure it's the correct one. So it's just thinking a bit. And now the access token will be automatically appended to my query when I will request it. If I didn't have this feature, you can always do this manually inside the header and specify the authorization, bearer space, and all this long string that we saw. But let's be honest, this feature is quite cool and much more useful. And now that this is configured, I don't need to ever worry about how I connect to my API because Insomnium can automatically, behind the scene, regenerate a new token every time I use this tab. So that's good because once it's set up, you can easily use your API and it's really convenient for development. So just to follow this example here, I will provide a JSON representation of my customer group. So with its localized name, some rejection percent and stuff like that. So we are creating a new one. So the REST convention recommend to use some post request. And when I send this, it's automatically using the token that I just got previously. And it successfully creates a new entity with the customer group ID 6. So that's the new one. If I go to, so it's another tab that this time we try to access the group. So I just replace the ID and of course my secret, which was updated. Okay. And as you can see, I get to access the group that I just created. I won't go into more details, but know that for this customer group, we have the same principle with some put that allows us to update the entity, delete operation that allows us to delete this entity, and you will find similar endpoints for all the different entities and domain that we have on the back office. It's just that at first there will probably not be everything you can edit from the back office, but piece by piece, as the module with the endpoints is updated, you will get more and more endpoints. And of course, we will be needing the help of the community. So once the V9 is stable enough and we have all the API components ready for development and that we know we are close to a finished version of it, you will be able to help us to add all those endpoints, because as you can see, it will mainly be about adding some configuration and just say, okay, if you want to edit the product entity, this is the URL, this is the CQRS command that you are going to use, and it's going to be really easy and fast to add these new endpoints. So I think I used enough of my time. I believe that we now have a Q&A session. So I guess, Christian, if you're still here, you can get back the access. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Jonathan. It was a great presentation. A lot of technical details.
Yeah.
So, yeah, to all who are watching, please be reassured that we will put all the links, all the presentations to the article summarizing today's live update so you can better understand what Jonathan just showed you. And I believe we do have a couple of questions. The first one is from Multi-Services Austral, and they ask, will the actual API, I mean probably the old one, be kept for compatibility with integration already done?
Yeah, indeed. If it's about the old web service, we didn't plan on removing them now. For now, at least, this is a new feature which allows you to use a more modern API, but the old one will still be present. That doesn't mean that it will never disappear. At some point, it will be removed. We don't know when. We didn't plan to remove it for V10 or anything. Probably the day that we stop using and remove the object model, we won't have any other choice but to remove it, since it's completely based on object model. But be reassured that it's not going to disappear anytime soon.
Yes, it's a completely different API. So there's another question from Sebastian, who's asking if he can do the request as an admin employee.
That's a very good question. As I explained, but maybe it's not very clear because OAuth is quite complicated. The workflow that we use is the client credential, which is only reserved for server-to-server communication, meaning you are not connected as an employee. If we wanted to be connected as an employee, we need to implement some different grant types and different ways to authenticate and get the access token. It probably won't be available for V9 because we will lack time to add these additional grant types, but that's definitely something that should be added in the future. So basically, compared to what I just showed, the main difference will be how you get your access token. So you won't be using the same credentials or the same grant type, but you will see, okay, I'm not connecting as a server, but as an employee, here's my name or my email and my password. And then you would get an access token that will allow you to do the same thing, except that the API will understand that in this context, you are an employee, but that won't be available for the V9. I doubt it.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Jonathan. Heikki asked whether you meant PHP attributes or named parameters. I think it was about named parameters. When you showed the endpoint configuration, I think it was about named parameters.
Probably about the new parameters that we added in operations, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. If
Yeah.
you still have some questions, Heikki, please do answer them. Ask them on the chat so we can better understand. Daniel Prestaworks asked whether it's easy to add new endpoints. As you showed that already, it is really easy, and we will share the link to the example module, not to the example module, to the module which aims to add additional resources for the API later in the article. But
So
this question
adding
is
new,
more extensive. Like, he also asks about the possible modification or adding new fields to existing endpoints.
yes. So adding new endpoints shouldn't be complicated because it's mainly about defining some new endpoints that can be based on CQRS common end queries, as we did here. But you can also use your custom provider or some doctrine entities. You can basically use anything that API platform already allows you to do. So the potential is quite large, I say. About modifying the existing ones, this will be more complicated. That's not something we think, not that we didn't think about, but we didn't develop it yet. Mainly because the CQRS queries and commands that we have today are already quite straightening the contract that we can use inside these APIs. So they are not really open to being modified. That's actually what makes them stable. So if we want to decorate or add some new fields, that's something that we plan for now. So I would recommend instead IDX or additional endpoints, maybe to get your extra parameters or extra fields for a specific entity, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's the old school way of thinking on how to work with PrestaShop. You just alter the product table, you just add the new field to the core table, and you
Yeah.
work on the core table instead of creating your own one and creating a relation between those two. Well, it's time to utilize best practices, and this is one of those moments where you need to think how to better structure your application, how to better create your modifications for the core. And I think that's it when it comes to the questions. One question from me that is a bit related to Sebastian's question: are there any libraries or extensions for the API platform which would allow us to see the logs for the API? So we understand better what happens with the API, like who added the product, who modified the product, which client, and so on.
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not an API platform expert, so I couldn't tell you, but I guess there are some, yeah, probably.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
So no worries, no worries. The good thing is that if we use the API platform, the tool that is mature and very popular in the ecosystem, I'm pretty sure there are some options, and it's just a matter of finding them.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, let's try to figure out what are the options we have. So I don't see any more questions. So I would like to thank you, Jonathan, to you, Matthew, for joining today's live update. And it's this time to wish all of you, all the community, very peaceful holiday season, and what's most important, a great new year, great 2024. And yeah, thank you to you, and see you in January.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.